Hi everyone, in this particular demo I'm going to be going over a lot of different things. Now I'm going to try and have as much real-time painting as I can, so this demo may be a little bit lengthy. If you have to fast forward or jump to the next chapter if it's something you have already reviewed in the past, because I have other demos that cover this stuff but in a lot more detail. However, this main demo reason is to take a painting from Rebelle 5 into Rebelle 6 and just show you the differences and how you may have to adjust your workflow. What I mean by that is I'm going to be covering a masking layer versus a layer mask. Big difference. One just protects the area that you're painting with, and the other one allows you to make non-destructive changes. And then in the end, we'll finish up with just some very basic backgrounds, but how those backgrounds are created is what I want you to concentrate on. They are going to be very different because we're going to use a selected area and not a selected area. It'll work just like transparent watercolor traditional, in the sense a mask will dam up the water, so to speak, when it starts to flow down and runs into that selective area or misc it that you put on paper. So for that reason, you may end up with different results depending on how you do your background. And when we're working with transparent watercolors, that's the most important thing you can remember, is that things are a little bit different. When we work with opaque colors, then we can just keep painting until we like what we see, literally. However, transparent watercolors, you may have a lighter colored object that may be completely opaque, but background colors will still come through that light color and contaminate your colors. So working digitally, it's a little bit different than working traditional, because traditional, you would block out those areas and then start fresh with white paper. Digital, you could slip layers back in underneath your digital painting, but then you still might contaminate your lighter colored objects. Let's take a look and see what we have, and we'll hopefully understand all the differences by the time this demo is over. Spoiler alert, I have one thing relating to another, so it would be best to watch the entire demo from start to finish. Let's get started. Just drawing it out from scratch, I'm just roughing in the outlines and the perimeters just to give me some detail of proportions. I'll try to do most of it as I paint, because remember, painting is just drawing with color. I am going to do the final stage now, and that is to create a mask for my butterfly itself that I will use to protect that area from background colors later. Okay, let's see what we got done here. Now all I did was just draw out the butterfly. I could turn off the mask just to show you that, and then the butterfly is pretty well detailed the way I wanted, because I need things pretty sharp in the way I'm going to do the butterfly itself. And we'll go even through some references. We're going to make this the colors we want, though. We're not going to necessarily go by any specific butterfly. Now the butterfly bush that it's on, I just gave a very rough outline of what size I want it to be, because I'm going to do all of that just with the watercolors alone, and let the brush, the color, and the water do the work. But the butterfly itself, we have it far more detailed. And then when we put the mask on, we have to make this black layer. Now you can make it obviously any color you want, but if you're still using 5, which is fine, then you could use this mask system. And I have several different demos. I could put one of them up now about masking and whether it's or not it's an influence layer, and then whether or not you're masking the opaque or the transparent part of the actual mask itself. Now, when we take this into 6, then the mask system is a little bit different, and it's not going to transfer into 6 the same way it is now, but we could still do some things that would make it just as good. But then when we have masks on layers, that's even better. Now this particular masking system, as long as you make the black mask for it, then I'll show you how that we will definitely just select these areas and make a selection protected area out of it, which is roughly the same thing that could be used on any layer also. But once you make your black mask or whatever color you want, I never use black at all for anything, so I just use it for either outlining, pen and ink, or creating a mask. Then that I know that if it's black, it's something in particular. Now this guy here, what I want to do is I'll turn this off, and we're going to paint a little bit of this. I'm going to go ahead and paint the body, and then also the flower itself in 5, and then we're going to take everything the way it is into 6 and finish it. And then this way we'll get a chance to show how this masking system will transfer into Rebelle 6 from Rebelle 5. But we'll also do a nice loose watercolor. Now I have this drawn out as the spice bush. Let me show you the picture. That would be right here. Now this one is just a spice bush butterfly, and this is where I drew it from. This is the reference I used. Okay, now let's get rid of that guy. Now we're back in, and then what we will do is just take this butterfly. I'm going to turn this back on, and this is what we will use. And then depending on whether the mask is here, this is right here. This is either masking opaque or masking transparent. Right now it's on masking transparent, so I'd only be able to paint within the butterfly edges, and that's what we want. But then if we splash over outside or what have you, that will do also, but that will be in 6. I have both of these versions on my PC now, and we're going to use both of them just to see how we could do this and transfer it from one to the other. Let's get started on the painting. Okay, I'm starting with cobalt blue and then one quick layer of quinacridone gold. Now once I put these two colors down, I have to hit the transparent lock. Now keep in mind I already reversed the mask so it protects the butterfly, and I could paint anywhere but the butterfly. Now once I laid down that blue, that's very important to put my specific colors down first. I'll zoom in and show you why. That if I want rings as flowers like the butterfly bush is, then what I want to do is put my blue down first. Then when I start putting down my permanent magenta, that magenta will carry and push the blue out to the outer edges of all those little shapes because I have the transparent lock on. So if I wanted purple rings down with a blue center, then I would have to put my purple down first and then the cobalt blue on top of it. Now what I'm doing now is just looking for specific cauliflower shapes, and I'm trying to keep them in proportion with the actual flower itself. If some of them get too big or even too small, I could just hit the undo button, and that will allow me to start the mixing process over. Then once this is done, keep in mind the white you see is the white of the paper, so we may have to protect the flower itself just by extending the black layer mask of the butterfly into the flower. If we decide to paint a background, those colors would bleed right through the flower. Even though there's white involved, that flower is still completely opaque and would not allow background colors to come through it. That is why we have to protect it with transparent watercolors. Let's take a look and see what we have. Okay, I just want to point out a couple of important things here. The number one would be right here, over in here. Since this is an influence layer right here, then that means if I turn off the mask, then my legs of the butterfly were protected, which is great, because then that way, now they might be pretty dark legs, it may not matter, we could paint darker colors over lighter colors, even in transparent watercolors, but just to keep them protected, then you could even go back and save some of that space for a highlight area or whatever of that nature. But for now, I wanted the legs protected, and they are part of the mask. And then also, since I had the transparent lock on, which is right here, this is the transparent lock, you could turn it off and on right here, then what that did was only allow me to paint within that very first preliminary layer of cobalt blue and quinacridone gold. Then all my colors only went down on top of those two coats of paint that went down very first. And then with that, now I could get this started. And then I have some of the drawings of just stems like right in here, but we could do those as we go. And then when we turn off the pencil, it will be gone. But right now, we could start even with the butterfly body itself. Let's go ahead and do that next. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is duplicate my spice bush layer. This will give me the opportunity to make that layer a mask. All I have to do is cover all those colors up with black, and that will become my mask. I could then duplicate that mask and add it to a duplicated mask layer of the butterfly and combine those, merge them, so to speak, and then that will give me an overall mask to protect both bush and butterfly if I choose to paint deeper colors in the background. Now what I will do is create a layer that I'm going to color in the butterfly just a little bit to show you the difference between erasing and a layer mask in 6. But now what I'll do is if I wet the layer and it's not influenced, it's going to wet the entire layer. If I choose influenced, then what I'll do is just wet the area within the butterfly. Whether or not it's influenced also works with the water tool. Reaching for my sponge, I'm going to now dry off some of these areas just to create a very subtle texture. When I start mixing my colors on that water, I will get some subtle hard edges wherever that paint and water carry to a dry edge within that protected area. Now using cobalt violet, I'm going to start coloring in some of the areas. I just pretty much chose to use the same colors that were just about in the flower itself, but we will see how that works. Now keep in mind, these colors are obviously going to mix too. So what we'll do is see what we come up with. Now there is the subtle texture of what we're doing, mixing water and color. Just trying to create further texture and darkening up a little wee bit more of the wing. This will give me the chance to create some darker colors to then go back and erase some of the veins of the wings themselves. Working on the body, I'm going to start, keep in mind, again, it's all a protected area. So what I could do then is mix my browns and blues and get various values of grays. I personally never use black, only because I would rather have a warmer gray or a cooler gray, that I try to stay away from neutral grays. Finishing up the body, what I'm about to do is merge 3 different layers into one so I can erase the highlighted veins on the wings. Now this is a permanent change. Even though we could undo a lot of different things, if we decide to keep on painting, then we may undo a lot of work that we've already done just to get back to what we really want to undo. That is a little bit dangerous too. So what I'm going to do is show you a way how to reverse all of this without losing any work that we've already did. This way we can make changes and have options later on after we paint more on top of what we did. Let's take a look. Okay, here's the issue I was talking about. When we start combining layers, then that is a corporate decision that may be hard to reverse. That is why I stressed at the beginning of this demo to save your work in stages as a Rebelle file. Then you could always go back and pick out layers and re-import them to a future version of your painting. Now what I mean by that is if I take this butterfly layer now, it is everything all together. So even if I was still here on this particular painting at this time, I could keep on hitting undo, but then I would lose a lot of the work I did to the body after I erased the wings. So yes, you could constantly undo, but sometimes it could be a question of how much you're going to lose until you finally get to the point of where you want to undo something you want to undo. Now, keeping things in layers and in groups and doubling them over, that's what we're going to do, and that's what will give you the opportunity to go back and make changes, and you'll always have that option and not lose any work that you've already done. Now, here's what we're going to do this. This gets a little bit complicated, but just please follow along. Now, since I made all of those on the same layer, I'm losing everything all at once. Now, what I want to try and do is redo the wings, but keep the work I already did on the body. Now, if I go back to the version that I saved right before this, and that would be right before I actually combined all the layers, before I do something that drastic, I save that version. That way I can always go back to it. And I'll show you why. Not necessarily to start over, but to pull layers out of that version that I may need. Let's do that now. Okay, now here's where it gets a little bit complicated. Please follow along. Now, what I did was, this is the version right before I combined all those layers. Now, this is kind of important because we could get everything we need out of this, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Now, what I did was I turned all these layers off, the butterfly bush, this layer right here, we're going to need that one too, but then I left that one on, left this one off, left that one off. Now, here's a part of my wing that I may want back again. Now, you can see the very subtle just bubbling from what the water did, but if I turn off my paper, this is what it would look like just as a PNG. If I go up here and save it as, we'll go back and find where I saved them, and I just showed you how to save it, but what I want to do is I'll change this into PNG, and then you'll see all of the versions of each one of these layers over here. This one right here is the body mask. I just saved it as the body only, and then that's this layer right here. And then this layer right here is the one layer of the wing, and then the other layer of the wing is the next layer down. So all I did was individually save each one of these as a PNG. Now that is just no more than just turning off all the layers except the one you want to save as a PNG. If I turn this one off and then turn this one on, now that's a different layer with different colors. I could save that as a PNG and then turn that one off. And then if I turn this one on up here, let's see, that one right there, that is the body itself. Now I need that as a mask, and I'll show you why. But this is where all of these parts of the butterfly were in individual layers, and that's what we need. Now let's go back to our final piece of where we left off and see how these PNGs can help us. Okay, now this layer over here, right here, the butterfly, is what I use to combine all of those layers. This is the very last saved Rebelle file I have of this painting as is. The problem is, if I turn that layer off, now I lost all the work I did on the body and the wings, and I don't have the opportunity to redo the wings. Now here's what we could do. I'll turn that back on. Now what I'm going to do first is import some of the PNGs I saved from the previous version. What we do right here is go down to import image, go back up, and here's all the PNGs right here. I'm going to import the body mask. That's what I want first. And there it is. It's okay. Now it'll perfectly register, which is great. So now if I turn off these, there's that one, there's this one, and this one. There's our mask that we just imported. So if I turn the drawing back on, the butterfly back on, and then now what we just imported, the body mask, we could leave the butterfly bush on or off. Now that's the mask. And then we'll leave that on. But then what I can do is duplicate this one over just to have a spare copy of it now. I will duplicate it over, turn that one off, and then what we're going to do is make this one the mask. I'll put on the transparent lock for that one. Go to my watercolor brush. It has the hard edge is fine. We're going to go to black. It's 100%, no water. Then we're just going to go over this. And whatever it saves, that's what we need. And then you could see how it's stopping at the wings at that mark that I already had made from before. And then now what we do is go to our magic wand, select that, and then go up here and invert the selection. And then now go down to this butterfly layer. That's everything, including the body that was underneath. And now what I'll do is just go to the eraser. That's a hard edge. And then since I'm on the butterfly itself, but I'm only going to erase the wings because I protected the body and what area I have done with that mask that I imported from the previous version. That's it. Now we're done. Now I could turn off the mask. There's our body. It's still there. Now I'm also going to deselect and let everything as it is. Now what we'll do is go back to File, hit Import Image, layer number 1, open. Hey, there it is. Hit OK, it perfectly registered. Hit File, Import Image, and then hit the other layer. That's layer 1. Now I have to hit Butterfly, open that one, and there's the different one now. Now, depending on how we put those, that's how we had those set up. So Butterfly was lower. And then we're going to put this one right here above this one, because we're going to turn, okay, then that one will go here. And then actually we could put these down here. We'll keep the body. The body is now the butterfly, and that's it. Now we have a second chance at it. But now what we're going to do this time, we turn that off. That's just a body. So I will change that to body. And then now these two here are this one, and I get a second chance at erasing or whatever I wanted to do that I may have wanted to correct. Again, transparent watercolors are a lot different than opaque paints. If this was opaque paints, I could have just painted over those erased marks and kept on working. But it's a little bit more challenging when the colors are transparent. So now what I will do is take this layer and then actually group them. That would be Control G. And then that is the grouped layers of the wings. So if I turn those off, I'll lose the wings now completely. But what I want to do then is duplicate that. And this is the way I probably should have done it the very first time, but then I can't show you how to undo it. Now what I'll do then is duplicate that group. And then now that I have the group duplicated, I could turn this group off and take this group and now combine these two layers and then merge them. And now I have just one layer again that I can work with. And this way I could go back in and erase this layer. I would be erasing both layers at the same time, but I won't be affecting the body of the butterfly itself. But then I also have a backup set if I need them here now. But this is just a somewhat of a large correction, but that is why it's a good idea to save versions in stages, but then also just to show you how to save a layer as a PNG and then import it as an image to start over again or give yourself another chance. Keep in mind, this is not just even for corrections. This is even if you want to import other layers or images from other versions of paintings that you would like to put in new paintings and just do it that way. Okay, let's go ahead and take all of this into Rebelle 6. Okay, here it is opened up in Rebelle 6 Pro. Now what I want to show you is just a couple things. First change, just so you know that Rebelle 6 Pro now has a auto hide menu, so you might see it bounce around every now and then up there. And then also over here, the mask we used from 5, there is no longer an influence layer. The only way it could be an influence layer if it's in a group with the masking layer. And sometimes that may cause you problems because you may want an influence layer but not necessarily in the order that the group is. So what we're going to use is just a selection method with the black mask, and it would be just as good, if not better, with the masking layers that we could add to each layer. And I'll show you here shortly. But what we're going to do first is, first we're going to take off the mask. We don't need that any longer. And then we will also just turn on everything. And just to leave everything on, because what I want to do is actually select everything. Accidentally hit that. Select everything. And then we're going to reduce it down a little bit, just so we can have some room for a stem over here and maybe just an ending stem. But I also want some room, more room down here to be able to just splash off paint right off the edge of the wings, and just to give us a little bit more room for some abstract-y type painting. So what we will do is then grab our transform tool, and I'm going to hold shift as I grab the corners so everything stays in proportion. And maybe about right there. And then we're going to give ourselves a room for the splashing and the stems. I don't want to crowd the edge too much, but then I'd put the body and eye and head itself in the upper third of the rule of thirds on the right hand side. And then that looks pretty good there. I'll just hit OK. And that's it. Now what I will do is actually take that mask. I want to turn it off and show you a few things here. Now we're going to do the, let's turn off the other masks here too. And the other one is right here. Now what I want to do is I want to keep the body the way it is. I kind of like the way it turned out. We'll just leave it. It kind of ties in with the colors of the flower itself, and we'll be good to go. But now with this right here, these areas right in here, I could just go back in and clean this up and erase it out, and then leave the wings open so we could do some nice clean painting within the wing area. But what I'd rather do is take the mask of the entire butterfly, duplicate it over, and then just erase out the body so just the wings are in that mask. And that way I can have several different masks, all for different purposes. And all I have to do is go back in then and magic wand select any mask that I want to use at the time. So what I could do then is duplicate this over, and then we're going to name this one Wings, and then I'll turn that one off, and I'm going to go ahead and erase this out. And what I'll do is just turn down the opacity so I could see where I'm erasing, and I'm not going to erase this area in here until I have the mask done. Then this way I'll use the mask also to erase, but then when I go to paint, any painting that I do within the wings will match up perfectly with the body already. So instead of trying to do one or the other, I'll just use the mask for both. You'll see what I mean. We're going to go ahead and erase out that body, and we'll get started. Okay, the first thing we need to go over is the difference between these two masks. Now, when we're talking about masking layer, that is what we imported right here from 5, and that is this right here that I could turn it back on if I want to. If I just say, for example, mask opaque, then that means it's masking the opaque area, which is the black of this masking layer. Now, what that means is I could paint anywhere else other than black, and it will paint okay on another layer. But now keep in mind, since we're in 6, the only influence layers you'll have now is within a group with that masking layer. That's a little bit different than 5 because you can make any layer an influence layer within any order of your layers. Now the layer has to be within a group with that masking layer. And that may affect how you want to structure your layers in some cases. But now here's the big difference though. What this masking layer does is only protect the black area right now. So I could paint anywhere I want, but that is a permanent change. It's only protecting a specific area. What a layer mask does is a non-destructive change. It will create changes for you, but they are not destructive. Your layer is still 100% intact if you disable or delete the mask. Let me show you. If I take this and just put no mask at all, again, that was the masking layer, but now I'm going to add a layer mask to that same layer. So if I right click on it, add layer mask, I have to make sure that the mask itself is selected. There's a blue box around it as soon as you create one, so that's ready to go. Now if I take, just say for example, the brush I have here right now, take the opacity all the way up to 100, I'll leave it that big, and then select my black, and I'm painting on the white of the mask. What it'll do is it'll completely take that black off. So I could just do it anything I want. If I want to dust it and take a little bit at a time, if I change brushes, then I'm going to be taking a little bit off at a time. But my point is, this is a non-destructive change. If I want to change the values of this flower up here, if I apply a mask to it, I could do the same thing and lighten up certain areas. But here's the difference. If I right click on that same mask and then just where it says use layer mask and click on that, I disabled it. Now my black is all back. Nothing technically has been changed. If I right click on the mask again and I say use layer mask, then what I did before with the previous changes is back again. So this is an excellent way to adjust your values, your lights and darks, that you could change things in many other ways than just the mask itself. And we'll show you that next with those wings that we imported from 5 and how I drew the veins on 5 with an eraser, but now I'm going to draw those same veins in 6. Let's do that next. Okay, what I'll do first is delete this mask, and then my black will be back to the way it was. And what I will do then is if I want to just work on the background, then all I have to do is use my magic wand, select the background of this layer, the mask layer now, in 6, and then I will select everything but what is black. And that works great. So now what I'll do is then, if I want to put real dark colors in the background, but I'm using real light washes to make the wings, then those dark colors will come through. So I could either protect the background this way, or in a worst case scenario, and I have other demos up about that too, I could just paint over those wings and then use this selected area to erase out those background colors from my wing area so they don't contaminate, for example, light yellows, oranges, reds, whatever color the wings may be, those background colors may be coming through and making those colors muddy. Okay, I'm going to deselect all that. Now what we're going to do is go down to this group. I'm going to turn it on, and these are the layers that we imported from 5. And I will go with this one first, and I'll turn that one off just so it's not confusing. And I will add a layer mask. Again, right click, add layer mask. Now I have a layer mask on this wing with colors in it. So what I will do is go up here and grab my watercolor brush. I will just go with a straight hard edge. Again, this is just an example of the technique. You use this technique any way you want. I'm just showing you, for example, if I wanted to create highlighted veins in a very easy, straightforward way, this is what I would do with a mask, because keep in mind, again, this is transparent watercolors. If this was opaque paints, I would just paint lighter colors over the veins and call it a day. But now this is different. So if I'm selected the mask itself, I have my black picked, I have my brush picked, I'm on 100%, no water. If I, well, let's make it a little bit bigger so you can see. If I start, and then, we're going to also make the drawing real light so we can also see what we're doing. Then go back to the mask itself. It's outlined in blue. Now if I start painting my black on that mask, I'm going to be pulling out highlights wherever each vein is just by following my drawing. That might be the, yeah, that was the edge of the wing. I'll undo that. That was the edge of the wing and not a vein. But this is just to give you a rough idea because I want to show you something next here that is somewhat important when it comes to even a layer mask, which is what we're doing right now. If I follow all these veins just real quickly here, and then now if I turn off my drawing, we can see what we did. But now again, that is only on the mask. So if I disable that mask, use layer mask, I turn it off, my wing is still there, completely intact. I did not make any permanent changes. So what I'll do is turn that back on, use layer mask, but now here's an issue. If I go back to my second layer of colors, of watercolors that I may not have wanted to disturb the first layer, now my veins are gone, but all I have to do is go back to this mask, right click, copy layer mask, click that, go up to here to this new layer of the colors that do not have the highlighted veins in it, right click again, paste layer mask, and that's it. My mask duplicated exactly, so now those vein highlights are on both layers exactly the way that was on the first one. So this is just a way you could use it. Now we'll be using these layer masks throughout because a lot of times what I will do is even do watercolor washes and then use a mask to lighten them up, which is a non-destructive change. If I start experimenting with color temperatures or even anything that's up here with filters, those are permanent changes. I would much rather do it with a mask, lighten or darken things up. I can indirectly darken something up by lightening things around it, and then that way it's still a non-destructive change. And this just gives you the opportunity to always change your mind or evolve your painting as you go. Now I'm going to resize this, and that is what our veins would be. Now what we're going to do is go back in and use the wing mask that we just created here and erase that out, and I'll show you what we're going to do there to get started with painting in the wings and maybe some of the background, and then we have the butterfly bush to do also. Let's get started. Okay, let's get the wings ready to repaint a different color variation just to experiment with different patterns, different colors. But first I want to show you something that we could use the masking layer for, which is right here. I'll turn it back on. This is the masking layer that we imported from Rebelle 5. Now that it's on, this is the entire layer. We made the wings separate from it. I'll go up to my magic wand, select it. Now I selected that area. Now I could just turn this off. I don't even need that layer at all anymore. And what this will do though is that selected area will apply to any layer of any order. Meaning that if I go up here and add a layer, we'll just leave it layer 1. Let's grab, just say for example, our dioxazine purple. We could just leave it at that opacity, that size and everything. I'll only be able to paint within the butterfly. If I go down to the drawing layer, add another layer, we'll just leave it layer 2. Let's grab, just say for example, our Prussian blue and start painting with it. It will only paint inside of the butterfly. Now these appear a little bit different because the reason why is the layer 1 purple is over top of the wings, which is right here, and then layer 2 is the Prussian blue, which is below the wings. So you're going to have a little wee bit different look of what layer is overlapping what. Now, here's another thing to consider. When you hit the magic wand, look at the invert selections. There's a shortcut, Control-Shift-I. Now, anytime I'm painting any of these layers, all I have to do is hit Control-Shift-I, and I'll invert my selection. Now, what I could do is paint any color outside the butterfly, no matter what layer I'm on. If I go back up to layer 1 at the very top, let's just grab yellow, and now it's only going to paint in my background or over the actual butterfly bush, that if I take that layer and move it down below the butterfly bush, it will appear different, because now the butterfly bush is over top of the yellow, which makes a big difference. Which one is over which? Layer sequence is very important, depending on what look you want. The last thing with this, if I deselect everything, I'll turn these layers off so they're not confusing. And if I make another layer, just say my background layer, that would be layer 3. If I start painting any colors, cobalt blues, well, let's go to a different color. Greens, if we have a lot of greens in the background and we want just to make it look like just typical bushes, brush, foliage, whatever the case may be, then I have greens that are contaminating my light colored wings again. So all I would have to do is go back to my mask, click on that, select it, turn that off because I don't even need it, go back to my greens, go to my eraser, it is on 100%, and take the greens just out of the butterfly area. So I have greens in the background, but they're not going to contaminate my lightly colored wings of the butterfly. Now again, if this was opaque painting, it wouldn't matter. I could put in any kind of background I want and then just paint right over that, and it will cover it. In transparent watercolors, and especially traditional watercolors, things are a little bit different. Let's go ahead and clean up these wings. Okay, let's go ahead and clean this up so we could try some new colors for the wings itself. Now I'm just going to delete these 3 rows right here, these layers. We're not going to need them anymore. That was just a sample. Hit the minus sign, and then I will deselect, and then I'm going to go up here and grab my wings mask, which is right here, turn it on, go up to the magic wand, select that. Now I could turn this off just so I could see what I'm doing. Now I have to go back down to the body, go up and grab my eraser, and that's good enough. I'll zoom in just so you can see what I'm doing. And all I'm going to do is erase this out right here. And that's it. Okay, we're going to shrink that back down. And that is it. Deselect. And all I have to do is turn these off. I'm going to put those together, turn those off, and we are ready to go. And what I could do then is I will select again, but I can do some washes of different layers over the background and let the colors tie in with the wings, or I could keep everything separate. It doesn't matter now. We have all the opportunities you want, and that would allow for more creativity in this particular situation. Let's get started. Okay, let's get started. I got my reference image pulled up here, but just to show you full size, I will go to it and bring it up now. And what we're going to do is right in here, this will be the little bit more browns. I'll start with maybe a cobalt violet and a raw umber, and then we'll make this much deeper black, and then maybe even towards blues, and then maybe even a hint of cobalt violet down in here. Now, the reason why I want to do this just the way it is for one big reason. I want to show you another advantage that I just ran across that I know will help you, and that is how we could mask off the blacks to then redo the oranges and the very pale blues on a very subtle pattern. Because keep in mind, again, this is transparent watercolors. It's a lot different than opaque. Let's get started, and what we'll do is go back, take that away, and go back to our painting. And now I need to go to the wings. And again, oddly enough, what I found out that you don't have to do is even have that particular layer turned on, and if I just click it, I will get that layer. And that is it. I have my wings selected now, and so I will go down here and just we'll just keep all of them together. I'll just go and make another layer right up above body, and then we'll just call it black wings. And I can leave it above the body because it is technically over top the body. Okay, well, let's turn off the mask, and we're ready to go. And let's see, we're going to start off with our raw umber. And again, I want to keep things fairly light. And we'll make it a little bit bigger so we can see what we're doing. And I'm just going to start right in here, and I want to make sure I have the drips on, don't want that. And then that's what I have to undo. And we don't want the tilt on yet either. Okay, now we're ready to go. I'm going to just put some brown down in here. I might even put a little bit of quinacridone gold just to get it a little bit lighter. In fact, what we could do is turn our diffusion off, and then I'll get all my colors down first. Then now I'm going to go to a darker brown. First we'll put the cobalt violet in down here, and then we'll let everything mix up. Now this is dark here, black up in there, and then we will put a little bit more blue here and go with the Prussian blue right in here. And then I'm going to now go with a darker brown in here, and this is brown, believe it or not. And this selection is really helping me. I'll do this part in real time, and then we'll go into a little bit of speed painting. Otherwise, this demo may be a couple weeks long. Just kidding. Okay, now we're going to put in some French ultramarine over top that brown. And let me give everything a chance to mix. We're going to put some browns over the cobalt here and there, just real light. I'd still like that cobalt to come through. And then what I'll do is just duplicate over the layers themselves to make them darker if I get what I want the first time around, because it's a little bit more trickier again with transparent. Okay, let's do that. Now we're going to make this a little bit darker up in here. I'm barely touching the screen no matter what I have the opacity on. We're going to put a little bit more browns in here, and then a tinge of cobalt violet there too. Maybe even a permanent magenta looks like. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, let's let that all mix up and see what happens. I'll keep my finger on the fast dry just in case. And that texture is okay. I don't mind that. Okay, now let's fast dry that. Now let's make another layer of roughly the same thing right up above it, because what that'll do is start killing the contrast and start doubling up on our colors also. In fact, let's start first by even just duplicating that one. That's better already. And then what we could do is soften up the top one and blend it a little bit more, and that'll diffuse the one below it. So now what we'll do is go to our blend brush and blend this top layer just a little bit more. And then you can see what it's doing already. Let me give it a little bit more opacity and blend quicker. And then I'll just leave some of those shapes there, but Most of the shapes you're seeing now are the ones on the layer below it. And let's double up that layer now. I'll fast dry that just in case it's moving. Let's double up that one and see what we get. That's not bad. We got a ways to go, but I might not go pure black here. I'm going to be one more layer. And let's see. We'll start a new one. And we'll just leave it layer number 1. And I'm going to go ahead and start this one. And these are all transparent. You'll be able to see each and every one of these layers because they're fairly thin when it comes to paint. Let's go with the burnt umber this time. And I am going to start with it. We're going to cut back the opacity a little bit though. Now if there's some streaks in here because of the veins, we'll keep that in here too. Please be patient. I am doing this real time. We're going to make a little wee bit more brown over this area right in here. We'll leave some of these sparkles of oranges and golds and raw umbers come through. That is the best part of transparent watercolors. You see multiple layers at once. Let's go back to our French ultramarine. Put some of it down, and this is already mixing, so we got to be quick. And this is kind of, how would you say, already somewhat abstract-y is what I would call it. But that's okay. Okay, let's let that mix a little bit, and you'll see some real fine, subtle textures coming out. And let that go like that. And then what we could do is, and I'm going to do that in speed painting. I'll fast dry that. Now what we could do is where, let's bring back up our reference big. What we could do right in here, where there's a separate wing, I could just use my freehand selection tool and just take that out and just do that so we get a nice straight edge there and make this area right in here a little bit darker just to designate one wing from another. I could do that anyway, even just put down a layer of water and use a transparent lock. There are several different ways you could isolate an area to do transparent watercolors, which works really good. Okay, let's go ahead and select that area off next. Okay, looking at our reference here, what I'm going to do is start doing some of these darker shapes between the vein areas, and then this way I want to keep that on its own layer. So if I blend it out into just complete transparent, I don't want to muddy up the colors and nice patterns I have on these layers already. So I'll put those shapes on its own layer. Now what I'm going to do is I'll go to the top, and that is also the layer, and I'll just create a new layer, and we'll call it shapes. And then what I'll also do is select all of these layers that have to do with the wings and just put them in a group. And this way I can also control them all completely at once. And keep in mind, if we just quickly need to select all 4 of them, we can adjust the opacity of all 4 all at the same time, as long as all 4 of them are selected. And we'll go back to shapes, but I'm going to do this differently now because we're going to take our drawing layer, move it to the top so we can see what we're doing, put the opacity all the way up, but this time I'm going to duplicate it over, put the transparent lock on it, and then select, let's go with the, right here, the hot pink permanent rose, and then I am going to just, that brush is fine, and I have it on already transparent lock. So what I'll do is make a nice hot pink drawing. Looks like we picked up a little bit of extra pencil there, but that's no big deal. And then what I will do is leave it like that, and I'll turn the layer way down so we could see. And we're going to go back to our shapes layer. Now what I'll do is color this in with water, and then I'm going to make this a transparent lock, and we'll do that fast drawing, speed drawing. Okay, now that I have my wet area roughed in, I want to hit my transparent lock first. Then now I could turn that off, and now that I'm on my shapes, I could go ahead and start with just a straight brown. I'm going to turn down the opacity a little bit, turn up the size just a little bit, and I'll start right there. And I'll start with this shape right in here because this would be the easiest. And then I could, I'm going to turn off the diffusion, and then you can see what it's going to do here. And then the same thing with this one. This one kind of feathers, starts right in here, and it's going to go up into just about perfect gradation. We could do the same thing with these. Now I don't have to paint the entire wet area. I'm just roughing it in here and there, but it'll give me some invisible guidelines and borders and boundaries that I could go by. And then keep in mind I'm going to add a little bit of French ultramarine blue to this. We'll do this in real time. And being it's on its own layer, I can adjust its opacity, even blend mode for that matter. And then I'm going to take this one and kind of blend it up into this one too. We'll blend that softer once we get going, and then we'll make the designation for the wing too. And then now put some French ultramarine here and there. I can even went I'm going to go Prussian blue. The magic of digital will undo. Okay, we got that roughed in, but before we do anything blending, let's let it mix for a while. And I'm going to soften it up just a bit. I might make it darker too then. This is just to eliminate any real big patches of brown or blue. I'd rather it mix. Okay, let's take that layer and double it over. Better. We can mix this one a little bit more. Down and mix that one a little bit, just to make it a softer gradation. Let it mix for a little bit. Turn off our pink, see what we got. Turn off our drawing, see what we got. Okay. Once we start putting in our veins and clean that up a little bit, and then keep in mind we're going to put a real dark vein around some of the edges and what have you. And then this I could feather in some too. Right now I think I got a little bit too much brown in it. I'm going to add a little bit of blue. I'll put that one on the top layer. Well, and let's see, let's go back to our blue. I'll take it off a blend. We got a lot to do yet. We're going to put in all those individual marks. Yeah, it's mixing. So I'm going to get rid of some of those shapes and let it blend just a little bit more. Fast dry that. And then let's put in our additional vein next, and we're going to make that one darker, where this is right in here down into here. And I'm going to leave some of this down in here fairly light. We'll do that speed painting since you have a rough idea what I'm doing here. Okay, we're going to make our second wing here, and I'll just keep it in with the wing group and make a new layer. Second wing. Now what we're going to do is turn back our drawing, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'll line it with water, but now since they're separate layers, I don't have to worry about one area touching another. As long as the pieces are far enough apart, I could keep them on the same layer. And I'll show wet, and we'll do this speed. Okay, let's do a little bit more work on this, and what we're going to do is we're going to start our layer masks for the lighter spots, the oranges and the real light cerulean blues with maybe a little wee bit of cobalt turquoise in there too. That'll add some snap to the color. But what I want to first do is go ahead and duplicate this group. That's all the wings and the shapes, and then just the layers that have to do with that. I'm going to double that over. And then we're going to turn this one off. And let's make it a little bit bigger so we can see what we're doing here. And then what I'm going to do is actually just combine all those layers and merge them. So we're only left with just one layer. So if I turn this one off, that's it. That's everything. Now that's what we want. And then the body is the body. And now what I will do is start putting in these masks. So I'll just add a layer mask, and I'm going to go ahead and do this speed painting, and then we'll talk about it after I'm done. Okay, let's take a look and see what we have here. What I want to do is make sure that right here the actual filter is selected, but I'm going to go in. I left a couple unfinished just to show you how we could do them real time. Not difficult at all. I'll make this a little wee bit bigger so we could see. And it was just these couple right in here. We'll do those. I'm going to go back to my soft brush that I was using, and we're going to put this one in right here. And remember, this is a mask. I need my black, and this is a mask, so there isn't anything we can't undo or shape up or clean up the edges or anything, which is really nice if you want non-destructive changes. I'll put this one in right here. And it kind of goes over to here but gets a little bit wider. We'll put this one in right here. And then this one in right there, and that's it. Now, what I did was I want to show you just quickly. This was I just call it pepper brush. I didn't have any idea what else to name it. But it is just, I made just black dots with a slight angle to them. A little bit like egg shaped, so to speak, elliptical. And then just put that up against a white background. Now this is the shape itself. I made one a little bit smaller, but it was too small. So I used this one because remember, as you increase the size of the brush to do bigger areas, so does the size of your dots. And I wanted these dots a specific scale to the butterfly. Now, maybe you don't have to worry about that. That's fine. But I do. But here's what I want to show you. Because I consider this a brush for my masking ability, then it doesn't have to match perfectly what I'm trying to do, only because I could go back to this sharp edge brush, go to my white now, make sure I'm on the mask, and now clean these up a little bit. If this one goes down into here and it doesn't belong way over here, then I'll just take them out. And all I'm doing is cleaning them up as to where they could go. Let's go back to black with our soft brush and put that back in. So see, when I'm working with a mask like this, I can keep on going back and forth, just cleaning these up. Then go back to white and go to the hard edge. And then if you want to just take some out here and there and make them a little bit more sporadic, we could do that too. Take the opacity down from 100%. You'll make some a little bit more lighter than the others. I will round this one out just a little bit like this. And then keep in mind, if we go back to that same sand brush, I can make it smaller, but then if I keep it with white, I could go back over this and it will just take out ones here and there. We could do that just to show you. But right now I'm going to trim this one up a little bit. And we'll get these ready to paint, because remember, the mask only applies to the layer that it's on. Meaning, that I can paint over that mask with a layer below it or a layer above it. It won't affect those layers. Okay, let's make this one like this one. I kind of painted it almost the opposite of what it really is. We got to take those out. I'll just do this real time. We'll just take a little bit of these out. We'll do the rest with the pepper brush. And I can even leave some of these here. That doesn't matter. We'll take them out though. We're going to trim this one up. And then we will trim this one up a good bit. And then again, now I'm at where it's white, you see now, right in here and here, I'm back to the white of the paper. And we'll leave those the way they are. Now if I take that same pepper brush, make it smaller. If I go back with my white, I could take some of these back out. Now you can see it's thinning them out a little bit. So if I only want some here and there, or not so close together in some places, I could go back to black and double them up even more and make them heavier in some places. So in other words, I could create whatever pattern I want. Some of these areas, they're a little bit heavier. So if I even go back, I'll just say, for example, let's do this one right here. And I'm going to go back and grab my black and make them a little bit heavier right in here. Just like that. Back to white. And I have to shape this up a little bit because this is going to be the patterns of my final colors, and you'll see how. I'm going to thin these up a little bit. I'm just tapping down here and there. Okay, that doesn't look bad. I'm going to leave these the way they are. Let's see what we got. Yeah, that doesn't look too bad now. Okay, now all I have to do is make a layer underneath that. And then what I could do is go with my blue, cerulean and cobalt, light, turquoise, light, and then paint those in. But then I'm also going to start with my orange. And again, I'll just be actually painting on the paper layer itself because we're already back down to the paper layer. So it would be just like painting if nothing was there. But I can always trim that up. And then once I put my oranges and burnt siennas and maybe just a little bit of yellow to start with, I can even put a mask on that to trim that down if I want, or make it a jagged edge or just an uneven edge, whatever I want to do. But we're going to do that in speed painting. Let's go ahead and get that started and done. Working with masks in this way is just an option of getting to your end result. We could have also put the opaque orange and light blue spots over the black on its own layer and then trim that up as needed. Whatever works best for you and your style and subject. Okay, now that you have a good idea of what we're doing here, I'm going to go ahead and finish up the butterfly completely with the veins dark up in here. That would be all of this right in here, and then we're going to make the body a little bit darker. We're going to go back in and put the lighter colored veins in, and then the shadows around it. I may duplicate over the wings and then make everything even a little bit darker yet. And then also the shadows, just like these right in here. That would be this right in here, these shadows, and then these shadows and dark places up in here. And then the real light blue-ish colored vein, and then see where we're at from there. But once I get all this done, then we'll stop and take a look at the flower. Okay, I'm just beginning the veins of the highlights, and I could go back and forth and work with them, making them longer, shorter, narrower, just by working with my black and white on the mask itself. Then once I have those masked lines in place, I could easily paint in underneath the masked areas. Now just trying to get some subtle washes here and there. I want to try and leave a little bit of texture behind, just so I have that classic watercolor look. Now working in underneath on the very base layer, I just called it blue. I'm putting in just some color for that highlight that I masked off. I went ahead and selected the wings area, so when I put in that subtle washed out pale green, they will confine to the edges of the wings. This way, if I go to put a background on, everything will be as it should be, where the borders end and meet up. Now darkening some of the areas of the body itself, redoing the eye, going back into the proboscis, I will bring out some highlights with a mask. This way I could reverse it if I want to. Put a little bit of fuzzies on, I think that's the technical term. I will finish up the antennas, and then what I want to do is one last thing is just decal the edges to eliminate that airbrush look to my masked areas, just so it matches the texture of the rest of the butterfly. Let's see what we got. Okay, let's take a look and see what we have. One more important thing I want to point out is I always view a digital painting at my print size. For my monitor, it is 62%. And then what happens is, this is from here, the edge, to this edge now is literally 12 inches exactly on my monitor. So if I want to see how it would print out, that's what I would do. Now, if I would start enlarging this many times, things are going to change. Now, what happens is if I zoom in and if I start looking at some of these textures that I just put down, they may start changing or falling apart because now you're bringing out much bigger areas and your detail is going to start falling apart. So in other words, if you take a painting and shrink it down, it's going to look more detailed than it really is. Well, that works in reverse. If you have a somewhat detailed painting small and start to make it really large, it may then start to look unfinished. This is something that you may have to consider if you want to enlarge it. Now for me, and the type of art I like to do, one quick tip: if you really want to follow up on a lot of that kind of processing, whether it comes to art and then printing, look up stamp design and federal duck stamp and state duck stamp design. That is a very interesting art that I've been following for years that will help you as to what you could get when it's small versus large and anything in between. Now what I'm going to do here is just take my flowers, and just in here I'm going to finish the orangey burnt sienna centers to all of these. That'll snap them up. And then also what I'll do is clean this edge up, because that was the flat edge that was up against the painting edge of the painting itself. And then I may put in just a masked off area of the stem here and there, right through the center, and then go ahead and draw that out. Because keep in mind, if I put a masked area in, it would be okay if I'm covering up the back side of the flower, but you'd still be able to see the bigger ones in the foreground that would be the front side of the flower, because it is cylindrical shaped and we want to try and make it look that way. Now, just taking it back and shrinking it down, I'll clean up the butterfly a little bit and finish off the flower, and then we will see where we're at then, and maybe possibly put in some kind of a background for background choices, and finally see what we end up with. Let's finish up this butterfly. Okay, the first step I'm going to do is just clean up the edge of the flower, just some of the loose splatter, and just to make it look like a splashy flower but still have the outer perimeter of a refined flower. Putting in my orange and burnt sienna drops, I'll put those on a separate layer so I could still clean them up. But I thought I would do that just to show you the variations of a mask versus just painting in opaque. Now the last thing I'm going to do is create a new mask for the flower itself, since I changed the outer perimeter of it. Let's see what we got. Okay, let's take a look and see what we got. Now one thing I wanted to show you was I just took the different layers of the flower itself. I just added orange, which is that right there, and I put those on their own layer, but then this time I made them opaque on top of everything, since they were such a deep orange and deep burnt sienna, just to show you an option of if you want to work opaque, that's fine too, but I just prefer to keep them on their own layer in case I want to change them. If I would have painted the orange directly on the purple, it would have been very tough to lift them out, and then plus they would have also possibly mixed in with the purples and blues, and it would have muddied up my orange. Now what I did was I made an orange layer, which is this one right here, and then I also made a stem layer, which is this one right here. And I took all three of these layers, including the original butterfly bush itself, once it was cleaned up, and put those three layers right here in a group. And then I duplicated that group and got this group right here, and then I merged those layers together, and just to create a new mask for the new perimeter of the flower. And that is right up here, this one here. But what this one is the master mask, because then I went ahead and added just the flower mask, the new flower mask, to this mask. And then I got this mask right here, which is an overall mask for everything, which is now something I could use to paint my backgrounds, and then everything will be protected that's in the background. Now what I wanted to show you then too was just the idea that, let me turn this one off. I went ahead and just cleaned up the butterfly a little bit, but again, you could even just leave it like this if you want and have that classic illustrative look, but if nothing else, then I would select this area, and then this way I could just now paint in any kind of backgrounds I want, and we'll try a couple of different ones just to actually give ourselves something to pick from. Let's go ahead in and wash a couple of backgrounds and see what we end up with. Okay, let's take a look and see what we have. Now, I wanted to do just very general basic backgrounds, but 3 different ways. And I have other videos about this also. And the selection tool with the drips and runs will act just like masking does with traditional watercolor. In other words, the color and water may dam up, so to speak, on the selected areas, just like it would with Frisket. Now, what I want to do is just show you, if you don't have any tilt on over here, and then this is the first layer right here I made of a background. I have mixing involved, but no runs or direction. So I'll get runs or direction, but then that's okay, because then what will happen is I could use the selected area with very little effects to the paint mixing. However, if I turn this one off and turn this one on, this one was with direction, but the selection on. So now I'm getting a ghost image down here where the paint started at the very edge of the butterfly right in here, and all the way around to the wing, but then started running down, leaving no paint around the bottom of the butterfly. So you might start getting ghost images around objects if you use the selection tool with the paint running in a specific direction. Now, on the other hand, if I turn this one off and turn this one on, this is with no selection. Let the paint run behind all the objects, but because we're dealing with transparent watercolors, you may be able to see those colors come through some of your objects when it is supposed to be a completely opaque object. Now, what I mean by that is then just turn on your selected area and then erase all of the background layer, which is this layer right here. If I go back to my master mask, turn it on, and then go back to my selection tool, magic wand, select that entire area, I could turn this off, but then go back to my background number 3 and then erase out all of that background color within my objects. And then without a doubt, my oranges, lighter colors, lighter values will not be contaminated from the background colors. And then just also to show you that since I had just somewhat of a simple basic mix, then I could also apply a mask to that background and start taking out some of the areas. If I think there's some shapes that are conflicting with the antenna or making it look too confusing, if I turn off the mask, you'll see what I mean. then this is the background without the mask. And it's okay, but it could be somewhat changed. All I'm saying is the mask will give you the option to revise your background any way you want. If you want to lighten up some areas and then leave some areas dark, or just create more of a texture than what you may have, the mask will give you that option. Let's put the mask back on. We'll leave it there. But now for me, I actually like no background at all. And if I would deselect, I just kind of like the classic illustration look of just a clean object in its somewhat small environment of whatever it's doing, and then that's it. It's just for identifying purposes only, so to speak, and that's it. But otherwise, with the different layers involved, you could easily add any type of background to your objects however you want, and then give yourself options that sometimes, coming back with a fresh mind, you might definitely like one over the other, and it is always great to have options. So let's call this one complete, and with that in mind, until I see you out in the field or back at the studio, thanks for watching.